This is White Centipede Noise Podcast. I'm Oscar Brummel. Today my guests are Ryan, Jeremy, and Frank of Yellow Tears, the infamous urological band and multimedia unit whose headquarters, the Red Light District in Far Rockaway, New York, has been a pillar for extreme and outsider music in the USA for over 15 years. All right, hello gentlemen, Ryan, Frank, and Jeremy. Welcome to White Centipede Noise Podcast. Ryan, Frank, and Jeremy of Yellow Tears, to be clear.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
You guys have such a rich history of so many activities between, you and your individual bands, projects together, Red Light District. There's a lot that we could dig into, and hopefully we'll get into some of it. But I think, can you guys just tell me, just starting off, kind of how you all got to know each other and in the context of like forming Yellow Tears?
Sure. Yeah. Well, does it take this one?
Well, I would say maybe one of you guys.
Well, Jeremy and I met each other in high school. I was a senior in high school. He was a sophomore. I kind of scouted Jeremy out. He looked like someone I wanted to be friends with. I knew he was in a band. And so I kind of approached him at this show when I saw him there. And just kind of like remarked that, you go to the same high school as me. And he seemed uninterested at the time, but I kept pursuing the friendship, and we became friends that way, and have been ever since. We started going to shows together and, shared the music that we were into with each other. And I think I kind of always just wanted to play in the band with Jeremy, even at that point. And then I actually met Ryan a few years later at a show at his mom's house. And then it had turned out, and Jeremy will elaborate, that he met Ryan there, but had previously met Ryan like a few years before. Many years before, I guess, at that point, when they were in middle school.
Yeah. I had met Ryan at a local show on Long Island in New York.
So you guys are all New York City area.
On Long Island in the suburbs of New York City.
Okay.
Ryan was from a different town, but I had met him at a show. He must have been 12, maybe I was like 14. And we kind of had like a brief like AOL Instant Messenger kind of correspondence, and then that faded. When you're that old, things like you just keep kind of like trying to find the people and the thing, but and then we ended up like re-meeting years later, I think when we did, like, it felt like fate or something, or destiny, and we became very close at that point. Me and Ryan, and me and Frank, as he had said, were already close from our time hanging out together in school. So
yeah, that was interesting. I think I could tell Jeremy was like a music fanatic when I first met him when I was like 12 years old. I remember he was like dancing. He was like rocking out to the band that I was playing. I was like, whoa, this guy like really fucks with this shit. Like he really loves music. But I think like, by the time we all became like close friends, it was like, that's kind of like, we decided that was our life trajectory. Maybe like it was going to be like music adjacent or something.
And I think the quality of our friendships, like certainly with me and Frank, like it was as if we had known each other forever, like it was like as soon as we started hanging out, we were completely like intertwined. And later on when I re-met Ryan and when Frank met Ryan, a similar thing happened. We just kind of became very close. Like we had a natural affinity for one another, which was reinforced by like meeting him again in this new context. I think it kind of felt like, oh, this is like special, and this is like noteworthy.
How then did it, that's a pretty textbook story of meeting friends in high school. How then did it like transition to forming this super fucked up band? And like, fucked up collective kind of going forward? Like, at what point did that happen? And you guys were like, oh, we're really not just all into music, we're like really into like this really intense brand or direction music.
I think maybe that has something to do with the fact that when we met Ryan, it was kind of like the punk scene, and Frank and I were, Frank was really into hardcore when I met him, and like metalcore and some of the more extreme sounding stuff, outgrowth of like punk, and I was starting to get into some of that. So, but there was, I think we all were into punk and stuff, but we had an interest in like more too. Whereas a lot of the other people in that scene were kind of not like, really like venturing into more experimental stuff. So I think like that gave us this common like, like searching for like the more deeper things and, more sound and I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, it's just like we all were just getting into new stuff together. And the quality of our friendship, I think, has a lot to do with it too. It just like we felt very connected. And so we were kind of just on this journey together, and it just became a natural progression.
Yeah, I think for me, it was maybe personally, I got really into like, I was very into punk. So that like ethos, I think naturally I was just interested in getting into more extreme stuff, like content wise and sound wise. And I started also to get really into like the sonic element of music and sound. I think like around the time that I met them, I was already kind of like learning how to engineer and things like I had electronic music classes in school. And I was, as I was getting more into like the sonic territory, I was getting more interested in like maybe more like psychedelic or extreme sounds. And around that time, Jeremy was in a band called Empty Silos Echo War that I felt like ticked a lot of those boxes, and I really liked. And I was starting to make music as well. I was like, oh, this is like, I was interested in working and collaborating with Jeremy specifically. We started to around that time.
What about the content and the themes that you guys connected on? Because that's a huge part of, I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like beyond just being into experimental music, it seems like the extreme content, the extreme themes of what eventually at least became Yellow Tears and things like that is a huge part of maybe the connection. What kind of media were you guys ingesting at that time and bonding over?
I mean, in the early years, we I mean, before, like, I'm talking about still in high school, I don't think we were really explicitly like talking about that stuff yet. But I think what it really comes down to is that our friendships became really close and intimate. And so like we were able to eventually, and yeah, getting into noise, obviously, like there was a lot of taboo subjects. And so it kind of like made a conversation possible about this type of content being like viable for exploration in like a band context.
Yeah, I think coming from punk too, is like I think at least for me, I was like interested in more fringe and like extreme stuff. So that felt like a natural progression.
THFX Noise Devices is the home of the Melancholia, Vox Vortex, Harsh Anti, and the Rita's Cracked Point Shoe. Unique pieces and custom builds made of the best metal parts, no cheap plastics, no mass production. Handcrafted since 2021 in Hamburg, Germany. For more information and the mailing list, head over to thfxnoisedevices.com. So, when did Yellow Tears begin and how? I mean, I'm sure you guys messed around and had different bands before then and things like that, but like let's go from there when that was like, and kind of onwards. How did that really come about? And was it as focused in the beginning as it has become now?
No.
And did you know
Yeah,
what you
well,
wanted to do with it? Because, you know, there were a lot of, tape releases around like, 2000, I don't know, late, kind of mid late 2000s. And then like, kind of seems like the Pissmop LP was like a big
there's
milestone, and things kind of went almost in a different direction after that. But the
definitely.
earlier stuff also shows those signs of, I mean, it's all connected. But at what point how did it start, basically?
Well, Jeremy and I have collaborated on a solo album I made. I was probably like 16 or 17. That was, it wasn't, I feel like it was like the first like noise record I made. It was like, some of it was like standard instrumentation, but it was like extremely blown out. And the track that Jeremy and I worked on together was like guitar feedback and bass clarinet. He played bass clarinet through a frequency analyzer. So I guess that was probably the first collaboration we did. And then I think, between Yellow Tears and Halflings, I think the Yellow Tears probably, that was the first
Yeah, I mean,
practice was Yellow Tears, yeah.
the literal specific reason why we started a group was because, well, obviously, yeah, me and Ryan and I had collaborated, and it was this seed that, like, we wanted to do more stuff together, and I was kind of like on the last leg of, or at my kind of breaking point with doing the rock band format. I was playing drums in this band that Ryan mentioned, and we had kind of broken up, but then there was this opportunity to do this summer tour, which was in the 2005. And, so we kind of did it. I was really trying to push these more extreme aspects into this band. And Frank, came as like our roadie. Frank had never played music before. He was a music lover, and we were so close. And we really wanted him to be on this tour, me and another person in the band.
Right.
And there was another personality that was clashing in that band. But, so we did this tour, and Frank was with us, and I was really trying to push these like noise aspects into the band. Like, I had my little like, bootleg tone generator set up and whatever that I was trying to inject into this music, and it really just like wasn't it, and we were on this tour, and we were hanging out at this guy's house, listening to like Pauline Oliveros and just getting, taking drugs, and it just kind of clicked, like, we can do something together. Like, this was me and Frank now having this like realization that, like, you don't have to have, we were getting more into noise, wolf eyes and stuff like that. And so we kind of just had this realization, like, we can do our own thing. I can break off from this band that I'm not really happy in, and we can have something that can really be ours and be this new exciting thing. And we called Ryan, like that night we were in DC, on tour, and it was just this really exciting like idea that we can have a noise band together. And there was actually a fourth member as well, whose name is also Ryan, at that time, that we contacted. And so literally when we came back from that tour, like the week that we came back, we got together at this Ryan's mom's house, and we had our first practice. And I think because we were coming from, like, we didn't really know how people made noise music. We didn't have any blueprint for it. So we just kind of came up with our own way of orchestrating like songs, but it was very much like a band format. Like, at that time we didn't use mixers. It was just, for this song, I'm going to play this and you're going to play that. And we each had our own amplifier. So it was very much like in the tradition of like a rock band or something. And I think in a lot of ways that informed like the composition style, which was very loose in the early days, but it was very much like loose changes. There was like structural aspects with a lot of room for like flexibility within that. Like, it was kind of more like the instrumentation would be set, maybe some of the effects processing would be like a certain way, and there would be kind of like gestures that happened at certain points throughout like the piece, like this is the part where I'm doing this and you're doing that, and then we're going to change, and we'll be looking at each other, you know. And so I think like very early on we developed that language of performance and of like composition together, where we're like communicating in other ways, in nonverbal ways with our bodies and whatnot. But it wasn't very like compositional. At least that was something that we developed slowly. And by the time we were working on the Pissmop, that was a conscious decision to start like making, you know, more compositional music, and also music that incorporated the concepts that we were kind of starting to explore, you know, more explicitly and with more intention. And that was, you know, that was really like a couple of years of development towards that style. But yeah, even in the earliest days, there was the seeds for that, I think, you know.
So those days you were recording still. So a lot of those earlier releases were from that period of you guys just kind of as a 3-piece.
As a 4-piece.
So 4-piece, right.
Yeah, it was a 4-piece from, I guess, the inception in 2005 until actually we recorded the Pissmop. It was still a 4-piece, but it was shortly after we finished recording and before we went on this big tour to promote the album with Alza Gelziga in the summer of 2008 that the other person left the project. So it really was, you know, yeah, that whole first period from 2005 until like the summer of 2008 where it was a 4-piece. And then it became the 3-piece for that tour, basically.
Liquid Diet, I believe the tape came out on Hospital before the Pissmop. And from then on, you guys worked with Hospital very regularly, maybe almost exclusively, on those, at least those several releases that came after that. Was that Liquid Diet release significant in some way, you know, sound-wise or theme-wise? And did Dominic have any influence in the direction of the band?
I think Liquid Diet was kind of the culmination of the first few years in terms of releases, maybe because it felt more like a condensed version of like that compositional approach, I think. And I think sonically too. At the time, it felt a little bit more nuanced than the early stuff in terms of like mixing and whatnot. But it definitely, I remember feeling like the stakes were a little higher because it was a Hospital release, and it was someone we definitely like looked up to in the scene, putting it out.
Yeah, and I guess like the other aspect of it, it was the first tape to have like the last track on it is full on just samples. It's like kind of like a very basic like sample collage, but I think, and then there were some like other samples like sprinkled throughout the tape. So I think in that sense, it was like, you know, beginning to kind of transition to our later stuff because we didn't really use samples in the early days before that. But also, I guess it is kind of like important. I think to some degree, just Dom taking interest in the project, I think gave us kind of this feeling that maybe we needed to pursue Yellow Tears more, I guess, like, because what had happened was Halflings was on a tour in the summer of 2006.
And Halflings is you and Ryan?
And Ryan, yeah.
Yes.
So we had started that actually shortly after we had started Yellow Tears, but because of Frank was in school in Albany at that time, so we were kind of like unable to do Yellow Tears except for on school breaks. And we had, around that same time when we started Yellow Tears, gotten into like White House and kind of started Condom and started discovering like power electronic. And it really spoke to me, especially. So we had started, Ryan and I had then started this like power electronics project to, you know, we had more access to one another. I was at school at SUNY Purchase, which isn't too far from Long Island. So I was taking a lot of trips back there. And so that whole year we were kind of able more so to focus on that on that project more. It wasn't necessarily like a preference. It was kind of just we had more access to each other. And so we did that Halflings tour, and we ended up getting Dom to play the last show of the tour, which also had Viadre and a couple other people. But I remember, Dom came up to our merch table, and we had a couple of Yellow Tears things, and he immediately gravitated towards that and was just like, what's this? I like this name. And so I think definitely just him taking an interest in it, and we looked up to him so much, and, he was one of our favorite artists. So it definitely, for me, I can say for sure it raised the stakes and of that project in general. It was like, okay, maybe there's something here that we weren't seeing or, and so I think then, and I don't exactly remember how what the process was of him asking us to do that tape, but it couldn't have been much after that he suggested it. I mean, we were going to hospital a lot when he had the store in the basement of Jammyland at that time, and I think he definitely at some point was like, I want to do like a Yellow Tears tape. And so then, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we consciously were like, we have to change things or progress it, but I think we definitely felt like we want it to be better or somewhat of an evolution because we revered Hospital and, we were very honored to be asked to have a tape for it. So
actually just, I was able to find the email from Dom.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. So he asked about it and he said, 20-minute tape would be good. Of course, it's subject to approval. No wanky noise, just good dark works. Sexual, evil, fetish, depression themes a plus. I think, and then the email got cut off. I wonder what that last thing was.
Okay, so yeah, maybe he was encouraging that stuff, which he was obviously seeing in the tapes that he got, and wanted us to explore it more. I guess it was a subtle, kind of pushing us into that direction, maybe. So
Right.
I mean, yeah, I didn't remember that, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So then tell me about how that LP came about in terms of, I mean, there's a lot that's different there. There's a lot of focus there. I mean, it's a highly focused LP conceptually, sound-wise, visually, and very different from at least what I've heard from the previous works. They were pretty just kind of raw. They weren't raw. I mean, they were produced, but like you said, they were very noisy, very, very harsh. And this is very atmospheric, very composed. The samples, the field recordings. So how did you approach this LP? How did you make it? And what was the process?
So that actually, we had done the Liquid Diet tape. I think Dom was happy with what we gave him and was kind of maybe had offered us an LP. I can't remember. It must have been. So, for the first LP, we definitely we were starting to evolve already, and we were starting to get deeper into some of the themes that we had been exploring. So we saw it as the opportunity to really progress. And we were all our little crew, which was already forming, that became Red Light. I mean, a lot of us were in a composition, a music composition program at school, some of us. So it was basically what, it was what we had all been working towards, I guess. And we wanted to, yeah, I mean, well, we were really composing it, basically. I mean,
So that's worth noting, is that you guys seem to have musical educations, right?
Yeah,
and you were part of musical educations at the time, and we're
mine, it's different for all of us, I think. I mean, Jeremy had a musical education. My education started in production and engineering, which I think is the other important aspect of the band. Right. That when we would record all this stuff, we would multi-track it properly. We would like try and do it in a studio when possible. We would like do, like a lot of those collage pieces on the record. We would like figure out interesting ways to like sculpt the sound, whether it be like miking techniques or, integrating like weird acoustics, like natural reverbs and silos or something like that.
Yeah.
So there were like different dimensions, I think, that we were pulling from, like musically and sonically at that, like when we decided to do this record. I think it was things that like we had thought about in the past and we had tried to put into place in the music, but like the world kind of expanded at that point, equipment wise too.
Divine Severance is an Australian label that releases a variety of different genres, including but not limited to harsh noise, power electronics, black metal, death metal, and more. Tapes soon to be released in the coming months: Moore's Fornax, The Death Furnace Demo, Rope Society, The Golden Rim, Astra Telepathica, The Emperor Protects, Puddle, Pulling Back the Layers of Unbridled Joy. Visit divineseverancerecords.bandcamp.com. So Ryan, as the kind of the engineer producer of side of the band, if it's what I'm understanding, what was the LP's recording process like from that aspect? Did you guys book studio time? Were you approaching each song kind of like one at a time? Did you see the whole album as an arc, or were they kind of individual pieces that just got put together at some point?
I mean, I think we saw like the end goal of this cohesive album that would become the Pissmop LP, but it was all these very small, like moving parts. Part of it was like we would work individually on certain pieces, and then collectively we would come up with these compositions, rehearse them, maybe perform them at shows. So we had this like feedback with the songwriting process. And then, when it would come time to record some of the songs, we did actually go into proper studios at SUNY Purchase, which Jeremy and our other collaborators with had access to. And some of it we recorded up at Bard College, where we would rehearse a lot. We did a lot of overdubs there as well. And then, the things that like we would do individually, we do it, like Jeremy would probably be in his dorm room and I'd be in my apartment in the Bronx. And I feel like those are more just like collage heavy, like edited pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were definitely, I think we started to like, we wanted to have, it was the first kind of time we really like foresaw this like almost like narrative or something, like you're saying, like an arc. But yeah, we didn't have it all figured out the whole time.
Yeah.
It was definitely like there were some songs that we wrote and like Ryan's saying, like rehearsed, and then it kind of was all coming together even up until like the end, like I remember the song, The Pissmop, Ryan made in Max MSP, which was a new thing that he was starting to use at the time, which completely transformed both our compositional abilities and our live performance. But
yeah, I think using computers was
a couple of weeks before like the submission deadline. I feel like it was like we were still figuring it out, and like kind of fitting these smaller pieces that became kind of the glue that helped solidify like the entire story of it, I guess.
I think so. And I think like conceptually we were taking the themes more seriously and trying to like marry the themes and the sound like in a more interesting way. I think like earlier on, naturally, like the themes matched like kind of like the violence or the extremity of the sound, but I think with the Pissmop, the themes just got like more esoteric and like bizarre, maybe, and the sound world's got like more interesting, like texturally and compositionally.
Out now on White Centipede Noise, Dry Routine, the new LP by Ochu. 5 minimal and decided arrangements of raw organic waste, tired motors, and idling electronic signals. Sounds that are unmistakably worldly, spun into Ochu's signature malaise, making them impossible to place. A continuation of the trajectory established on his preceding albums, Unproductive and Lemongas Vartens, this time with a slightly noisier edge. Limited to 200 copies on black vinyl, with hand-stamped coffee-stained sleeves and insert. Available now at whitecentipedenoise.com or soon from a distro near you. I mean, if you guys were part of like recording at like SUNY and stuff like that, I assume you had kind of a peer group that wasn't just, the basement dwelling noise scene people. What did they think of all of this stuff you guys were working on at the time?
I don't know
were
that
you,
we
were
have.
you able to share it with them and be like, oh, guys, we got this band called Yellow Tears. We're working on the Pissmop and doing gargling and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, as far as other people I purchased, we didn't really have a much larger friend group than just the people who kind of became Red Light. It was pretty insular. We didn't really have like, I mean, we were like acquaintances and people knew us that we did like noise and stuff, but it wasn't really that intimate. And as far as like our friends from Long Island, unfortunately, when we did start to do like Halflings and Yellow Tears and start to kind of share it with them, it wasn't accepted really. And so it was kind of this slow like detachment from that group of people that would have been, still happening around the time of the Pissmop, but we would have known then not to really like share that with those people, which I think naively we did like share it in the early days. Like we would post shows and like, share our like lyric books and stuff. And it came back to bite us to some extent. Like people were very uncomfortable with that. And so
was it mostly the content or just the type of music in general?
I think the content, more the content, but I think also the type of music wasn't really attractive to most of those people. But I think the content is what felt offensive to people.
I think some people were intrigued by it, though, who you wouldn't expect it. Like some people from the punk scene entertained it, or like I had a group of friends that I lived with before we recorded the Pissmop, but out of high school that were more like from the punk scene. I think we would like have like we would have shows and they thought it was cool. I got, like I think like Carlos played at my old apartment and we all side. We did, yeah. Like there was a period where maybe it was okay. Like there was some crossover maybe with the music, but it was a very short amount of time,
So I guess the concepts and themes are a big thing we have to dive into, and we're kind of tiptoeing around them at this point. I have, I ask people usually from Patreon and stuff, and on like the Discord server, I have if they have questions for the guests, and got a few questions for you. And I think one of the most like direct questions that'll pierce this bubble is one person asked, "Do you guys like to drink piss?"
Frank necessarily like to drink piss. I mean, certainly on the,
do what you gotta do.
Yeah. On the Pissmop LP, I think it was, we were focused more thematically on kind of piss fetish. And I think the band kind of is now like associated with that. And I will say that we did drink each other's piss as part of the recording process, because I think we wanted to feel fully immersed in the themes and concepts that we were exploring. We felt that we had to do that. I wouldn't say that I'm not personally into piss fetish. I don't, get off on that. I don't piss in people's mouths.
None of you guys?
I'm not against it.
I would certainly accept piss from drink certain people's piss, maybe.
Yeah.
But,
I think it's, yeah, I think this is part of the, maybe we're going to ruin our own lore here, but well, I can say for sure that I think I probably am the genesis of like the piss themes. I think I came up with the band name. Pornography that had piss and piss drinking in it was something that I discovered in high school, and it certainly impacted me very deeply. But at the end of the day, I think it's less about the specificity of that as much as it is the concepts and the implications that it kind of brought up. So
you mentioned being esoteric. I mean, I want to cut you off, but you mentioned the esoteric nature of it. And it seems like at this point, it's become an allegory for many things. I mean,
absolutely.
Can you start to talk about that a little bit in some way?
I mean, I think it's definitely, I think this concept that we've explored in several different ways that really represents well is the idea of, you know, a lot of times you hear the intersection of the sacred and the profane, but I think what we've really focused on is the intersection of the profane and the mundane. So it's kind of the everyday, like these kinds of like perversions of everyday existence and of everyday things and how that seeps into everyday life. And I think that's a pretty big overarching theme. And I think piss is a really great, you know, symbol of that, because it's both this painfully like kind of mundane thing that every person has to like deal with, and it's also this thing that becomes sexualized and fetishized in these like really extreme ways. And so once you've encountered that, then how does that like change your experience of that, you know, every day? And that's kind of like my experience or my understanding. So I don't want to speak for the other guys. I think we all have our different kind of understanding and perspectives on it. But I think that's definitely a really big aspect of it for me personally.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, you mentioned you guys have very intimate friendships, and, you know, you're working on this project that is more than just a band. It's kind of, you know, you've done a theme park. It's kind of a multimedia thing. You know, you kind of just gave your take on this theme, and it kind of maybe came from you brought it up in the beginning, but how do you guys work together in terms of discussing imagery, what an album is about? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of collaboration between all three of you. I would assume that it's not just like, oh, he writes the lyrics and the text, and I just, you know, make the noise, right? I mean, what are your conversations about an album like beyond just the sound?
I mean, yeah, I think Yellow Tears is a fully democratic society here. You know, we all like, it's like structurally like there's not like a hierarchy or anything, but we all, I think as time has progressed too, we've all kind of like assumed certain roles in the band, maybe, of like what you know, depending on like what each of us are good at. But I feel like oftentimes when we're approaching a record, we know that we're working on like a collection of material and we have like thematic ties, but it isn't like fully revealed to us until, you know, we usually have to reach a certain point until it's like completely crystallized and clear, like what the cohesiveness is. So there is a process of like songwriting and building up, almost like world building, you know, structurally testing out material through like live performance and stuff. But then I feel like there's often like a long period somewhere in the middle of like getting to the bottom of like, what is this? Like, what is like the cohesiveness of this material? Like this like, what is this expression going to be? And like, you know, nothing feels firmly ready until like we reach that point, and then we can like move forward with the record, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process of discovery. You know, I think that's important to point out, Ryan, because
yeah, definitely.
We're not, you know, it might be like heavily like composition or, you know, compositional, but I don't think we approach or have ever really approached it from an hyper intellectual like stance. I think it's always been something where we need to experience it both as like choreographers and participants. And you know, yeah, we have these like loose thematic ideas, but over time, like it is revealed to us more. And I think, you know, certainly in the early days, like when we all lived together, every day was like Yellow Tears practice or something, like it wasn't like, it was fully integrated into our lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so it was really just like the process of experiencing each other in that way and experiencing this shared goal or vision and the collaboration of that helped us like work on things. It wasn't like, it was just fully integrated into our lifestyle. That's kind of the best way to explain it.
Right.
And we've been apart, that's had to change. And but as far as like the period of like our kind of most of our produced work, we haven't really like released a lot over the last 10 years, even though we have a lot of material. But in that period, I think that was really how, a lot of times we would come up with the title that we wanted.
Mhm.
And so the title would kind of
That's
be
true.
this like guiding like light that we were like trying to discover what that was. It wasn't like we
It's
know
still like
what
that too.
no, it's completely still like that. Titles and that's really inspiring to us when we feel like we hit on something that resonates and we don't fully understand what it is, but we need to
Just
kind of
trust the
like
title.
right trust it and then it's like uncovering,
Investigate it. Yeah. Yeah. I think
um,
also a lot of it comes down to just, making sure to go back to the roots of the project, which is like just playing with each other too, like just making sound together and like finding the joy in that.
When you mentioned you guys had shared that, you know, that you guys had drank from each other at some point, was that like one time to like symbolically lock it in? Or I mean, we see a lot of gargling and a lot of yellow liquids throughout performances and recordings. Is that every time what you guys are using? Do you
well,
ever
no, I
do
mean,
you fake it at any point?
only,
I can't say we fake anything.
There have been times
we've had, yeah.
we've used water, and there have been times we've actually used piss. I
I'm
mean,
not saying
yeah,
it's
sir.
faking it, but I mean, are we really using that every single time?
No,
Well,
It
no.
depends on the
When you-
performance.
When you were saying like, yeah, I think when we first like tried that for when it was towards the end of working on the Pissmop. And like Frank said, it was kind of this thing where it didn't really feel right if we were going to be exploring all this stuff and not really like experience it firsthand. We wanted to move past this kind of aspect of like being gratuitous or something and voyeuristic into like the actual like experience. And our friendships provided that safety and like platform to do that, even though it wasn't really like a sexual thing at all. It was more about like bonding and just the intimacy of like very close friendship. And then, yeah, like in after that, when we started incorporating it more, it was just part of that world that we had created and part of that intimacy. But yeah, there have been times at shows where, I mean, the amount of liquid that we need was obviously unsustainable at a lot of shows to just, although there was one show where we had a bucket and we had like people like just filling it up throughout the night. But I think even then, we needed to dilute it a little bit because we're talking about like 5 gallons or more that
More than 5.
we would need because we were using fountains and making like installations and 4 shows. So, I wouldn't say we were faking it as much as you do
Sure.
what you have to do to supplement.
How does that feel to use that during an performance? Does
I
that
think it
add to getting in that mindset or getting?
Yeah, I think it can be like disorienting and sometimes like humiliating too.
Right.
So I think sometimes, like especially in that period where like it was something we did do every show, it kind of like doing an act like that in the beginning of a set would kind of change the trajectory of it because it was like transformative in some way. I think like sometimes it would just like feel insane, even if it's just like water or something, just like, like just being dunked in liquid or something is like a very disorienting experience, I think.
It must change the feeling of the room too. I mean, like depending on what kind of show it is or what people are expecting or whatever, like once you get to that level and you guys come on and like it must be like, I don't want to say room killer, but like severely change the vibe.
It definitely, yeah. I mean,
sometimes it would be invited. Sometimes people would want to garg with us, like random people who like just like stumbled upon the show or something.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be clear, we haven't like used live liquids for the last many years. We don't play a whole lot anymore anyway, but in the period where we were, I mean, there was definitely, it was mixed reactions. I mean, I always remember this one show we played where the bouncers like started freaking out and like left or something. Do you at Public Assembly? Like, I don't know if you guys remember it, because what it was we had this loop playing that was taken
loop
from pornography, and they were kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like, and then like we started doing stuff and that got really uncomfortable for people. So
I think,
it was like this like embodiment like thing at the beginning of the set, and then that, once we crossed that line, it definitely, and it definitely like puts, at that time it was about like transcending and transforming like our consciousness.
And I think in that period we were also, I mean, visuals were like incredibly important during that period too, and we would use a lot of like live porn videos and like manipulate them and stuff. And I think it was important for us to like almost like place ourselves in the scenes themselves, because it doesn't feel right to just like, I don't know, like Frank was saying with Pissmop LP, we were like touching on all this, but like to not actually like fully immerse yourself in it, I think.
It felt hypocritical, and so we needed to like embody it more.
So we started using like cameras and things like this. So it's like, oh, like we can actually like make our own scenes live too, as like a contrast or to complement like this porn that we're projecting as well. And Monday, like we would use stuff from like action movies and stuff like that too.
It seems like you guys are really like living it. I mean, I played at Red Light in
2009.
2009, yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't remember which one.
So we weren't there. I was just asking Frank if he had caught that set. I'm pretty sure he did.
I
think you were there, and like, I mean, it was like I know it was like everyone was Luke and Pat Yankee. Everyone was like, that's gonna be the highlight of the tour. We're super stoked to go play with them. I think Pat had worked with Nick, right?
Pace.
Right. Yeah. Did the diaphragmatic, right? CD. Diaphragm CD. And there was like not many people that came out. It was like, a Monday night or something like that. But like whoever was running the house still took it really serious. It was like, okay, showtime. You like put the red light on. Like the sound system was amazing. Whoever was doing sound like took it really seriously. And I knew about Yellow Tears at this time. I don't know if I'd like listened to it that much. I'd never seen you play it. What everyone heard from Yellow Tears, like these guys are serious. Like they live together. They have this house together. They have this band together. They live it and breathe it. Like it's not just a thing they do.
Not a hobby.
It's not a hobby. This is their life.
And for certain, during that period from like 2008 to 2012, it was absolutely like a lifestyle. It was a lifestyle completely. It was something.
How did that spill over into your personal or private lives? I mean, was there any like separation of that?
Not really.
I mean, for me, I've worked at teacher aide in a school for many years, so I've kind of had to keep it private, or tried to keep it private. At certain points, ostensibly kids have found out about Yellow Tears, but I don't know to what extent. I recall some kid who was kind of like in the high school, kind of like a bully and antagonist, and You know, when I'd pass him in the hall, he would just like say yellow tears, just like at me.
Yeah, Frank got bullied in the high school.
This kid has like looked me up and discovered yellow tears, but I don't know if he understood anything.
How did that make you feel? Like, how do you feel about that when someone calls you out
I
like
mean,
that?
I've always felt worried that it would somehow compromise, my job in that respect, because just because of people not understanding it. I just always imagine like a parent seeing it and being like, oh, that, not taking the time to try to think about it and just kind of,
Mhm.
thinking that, what's this sick pervert doing working with children, even though that's the part of the thing
Yeah.
from the,
Do you think that'd be a valid response from a parent?
I don't think so. No.
I don't think it's valid, but I think it's expected.
It's just,
Right.
I'm
It's,
trying to be realistic.
I mean, look, like, yeah, I've thankfully like never, I've been able to avoid having to like in a work situation have to really like get into that. I've carefully navigated that. I'm going into a field now where like it probably is like something I need to like keep secret for sure. But I do also feel confident that if anyone was willing to have a conversation about it, that I could completely defend it and also like point out why the stuff we've done actually qualifies us more to work with people
Right.
in various like ways.
Yeah, that's
Than maybe like a standard person, which we could get into at some point in this interview or not.
Yeah.
But it's I'm not that worried about it, but I'd rather not have to, I guess.
Sure.
I've had to have the conversation many times. I mean, yeah, like I guess, yeah, I through my career and I guess my personal life too. Yeah, I mean it's I feel like it's come up a few times. I don't like try and hide what I do creatively. I mean, I work in creative fields for the most part, so it's not like a big deal, but but people I feel like are more understanding of it than I would initially like give them credit for. Yeah, or like more open-minded about it.
Sure.
But sometimes like, yeah, it's time to have like the tough conversation. Like, yes, I've drank piss on stage. Like,
Maybe times have changed a little. 2006 or something.
yeah, exactly.
Mainstream now, so
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you can see it on television and in like popular movies,
Yeah.
like jokes about it. Like, I
Really?
think people
Okay. Well, that's one angle. That's maybe true, but simultaneously, I mean, it's kind of a.
We probably did that actually. We probably helped.
You probably
Yeah, I think
mainstream.
we helped.
Yeah, we helped progress society along a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, but there will also be people that are. I think there's argument for both, but I think there's also the element that certain things don't fly like they flew in 2006. Like, I mean, at least
That's true.
they fly, but they get more harshly criticized, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can definitely go both ways. I think, I think sexuality in general is something that's like more, kind of mainstream. But on the other side of it, sure, there's like, there is still very much like conventions and taboos. So, but, at the end of the day, it's like, well, yeah, I think we have like, our stuff is more complex than just like pornography or something, and I think it's not that hard to see that, but I don't really know how to
Well, of course. I mean, but I think it's something to be said that you guys are prepared for that. I mean, I think there are different and have had that conversation already with people. There are approaches that people take with that kind of thing where they like, they'll take a vow of silence either because they don't want to or they're not prepared to kind of have a explanation for what they do, or it's like, why do you do this? And it's like, I don't know, I just want to. I respect that you guys are aware of that and kind of aware why you do what you do and are able to speak about it openly when you have to. I mean,
I don't think we predicted in 2006 or something that, like the nature of the internet and how things will just live on forever, especially on YouTube, maybe. But like, yeah, that's something that has come into every like meaningful relationship in my life with someone who's not like like from this scene or something. It's like, oh yeah, if you just like Google me or so, you're going to you may find some stuff that is questionable. So I should probably get ahead of this while I can.
How do you guys typically break up your duties as a band? I mean, you kind of hinted at it already, but like, I know you're not as active these days as you maybe were at that time, but like, let's say peak records era, hospital records era, like how were you guys breaking up duties, like technical ideas, performance, stuff like that?
I mean, during that time, I feel like it wasn't as distinct, the roles.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we all, it was just kind of like, if we have an idea, like, let's do it together. Let's figure it out. It was very, we shared like a lot of the responsibilities. I mean, when it comes down to actual like performance and stuff, some of that was just naturally delineated based on whatever each of us possessed as individuals, like technology wise. Like, yeah, Ryan had max MSP and could do that. So that kind of like determined what he was capable of, as far as like pulling off our live sets. But really, like, it was kind of just like what makes sense for, or it was just, how are we going to actualize this? And we all were able to step up in different ways. I mean, very specifically when the fourth member left, and we had this tour to go on to perform all this material from the Pissmop that we had written with 4 people. Frank really like stepped up his role and was able to absorb and then surpass in a lot of ways what the other person had been contributing, which wasn't much conceptually at that point. It was kind of more just like a performer. So, like, it's just kind of that. It's really like, and I think that period it can be defined just by like, who's free at this moment to do this in this set. Like,
Right.
if you need to play my sampler at this point, we'll do that. And, when it came to writing the record, it was really just like, if someone has an idea, or, sometimes it was a personality thing. Like, Frank makes more sense to make this sound, or, like conceptually makes more sense to be the one, with the binaural mics in at this point or something. So it really, like, I mean, I've said it a lot, but I think a lot of it just comes out of the relationships and just like, how are we going to like actualize this idea, and who's the best person to be the one to do whatever it is that we're needing to do.
Ryan, I know you probably got to hop off in a second here. One question maybe before you go, if you have the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you guys think that you've maintained this project throughout so many years, and a house? I mean, I know you're not as active in the same way that you guys were at one time, but a lot of these things seem to be kind of short-lived bursts of energy and ideas and friendships, but then they might kind of burn out, but you guys you're still Yellow Tears. You're still, this idea still exists. This Yellow Tears brand, or this Yellow Tears philosophy still exists, and it still like shows its head once in a while. You guys are both still living at Red Light, after so many years. How have you managed to hold this all together?
Well, I think maybe there's a distinction for sure, like between, I think absolutely every now and then we like poke our heads out. And maybe we aren't working as much as we used to, like in our heyday when we could work together every day, all day, like for the most part. But I think like we still carry the same work ethic. That's like one of the underpinnings of the band, I think, is that like we do take like the craft of what we do really seriously, and we still do. And while it's not as like out there for public consumption, we still, I think, are constantly working on something. Things maybe sometimes take like longer to brew or like conceptualize, but we still like take it very seriously and take like the work seriously. I think that's one important aspect. I think our friendship is another one that's like really important. Like this is like the language we've decided to learn to like speak with each other, and it's the way we understand each other and interact with each other. So like that's like just like kind of like foundational to our friendships as well, is like the work we do together. I think also like we've all ended up like pursuing things professionally too that kind of help feed back into like the ecosystem of like our creative projects, and that's important because that kind of just like integrates into what we do already, instead of us having to like separate ourselves further from the creative stuff that we do.
And you guys, I'll ask you the same thing. You guys are still living at the house that I was at in 2009, and I assume you still do shows once in a while and things like that.
Yep.
That can be very tiring. I mean, I know show houses collapse after a couple of years typically, and you guys are still kind of going. And when I was there, it was like it was a decent house. It wasn't just like a total dump. It seemed like a place that people actually live, and then happened to be that there was a space in the basement,
Part of it is we have to thank our landlord for not putting us out after all these years. And
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have this like really solid situation with her, and that has obviously facilitated our longevity in a big way. Did you have an
I mean, yeah, I think just the passion for art and creating work, and for the friendship that we have is what makes Yellow Tears and just everything that we do sustainable. I think is that we're just driven to do this stuff for life. It's what makes us happy, and even if we slow down, it's like doesn't mean that the band never has to stop going, because it's just it's just like a part of our friendship, and Ryan said the language of our friendship. But yeah.
And I think also, if I could just add my part, like, I think a big part of it is accepting that things change and evolve, and learning to like sit with that even during times when, there might be dissonance or something. But, then just kind of embracing change, and, and also like realizing that, or coming to a place where, I think for Yellow Tears specifically, it's more about like that it's just an expression of something that we do together, and it doesn't necessarily need to have validation from the outside. I think
Definitely.
we were kind of at a point where we could have like pushed more of like that public facing thing harder, but it also came about at this time where we were really like wanting to change our like style or approach, and felt like, that was more important to us than kind of satisfying an audience. I mean, that's not to say that we don't really enjoy performance and the communication and sharing and connectedness that happens when you do perform, because that is like super big part of our value system also. But it's more just about the impetus for like doing work, just really like embracing and understanding that when that comes internally and amongst the people, that it gives you that sense that there's no deadline for anything, that as long as we're still, alive and able to like experience life together in some way, shape, or form, that we can find ways of doing this project together and experiencing it together, and that will undoubtedly look different as our lives continue to evolve and change, but that we're here for that ride, and so that's really, when it comes to like a project like lasting for our lifetimes or something, that's really at the core of it for me. And then with the house thing, it's different, but it's related for sure. A big part of that has been like not doing shows all the time, And I think what you mentioned about the house being like kind of nice also is a big part of it. Like, I think the fact that we've taken and more over time that we've taken pride in the space and really wanted it to be nice for ourselves, but also a reflection of our lives as the art that we've done. It's about striking a balance between sharing that and opening that with the world, and also like having it be a real thing in your everyday life. So, you know, it has necessitated as we've gotten older that we can't do as much stuff. And actually, like, I think after Hurricane Sandy, which did kind of shut down the Rockaways in 2012, a lot of people like thought that we shut down. And there's still people to this day that if I'm like, oh, we're still out there, they're like, oh, really? I thought you closed down after Sandy. So for some reason, like, you know, that event seems to have changed awareness about like our space. But then we've also experienced like totally new crowds of different people like discovering it for the first time. Like last summer, we had a string of shows that were some of the best shows we've ever had. And the, you know, TEF played. I know you had him on shortly before that tour they did. That was like a completely like life-changing set. It was so unbelievable.
Cool.
And
yeah, I gotta hop off. I'll talk to you guys later, though. Thanks for having us, Oscar.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Ryan.
But yeah, you know, like that show and other shows, there was a ton of people who were here for the first time. So it just kind of like having like new people coming in and kind of new communities able to discover the space also like reinvigorates it time and time again, or, you know, so that it's because it is a community space. And I think community is so central to what we've done here, which necessitates community, you know, like we can't like do it without like people wanting to be here and wanting to come out here to shows. So, so it's not only our achievement, it's the achievement of everybody who has participated and come out here.
Yeah, it's really affirming to me to, after all these years, to have new people coming to the house and still feeling the same way about it that people felt in 2008. You know, and it's certainly motivating. It makes me, you know, want to keep doing it. And
yeah, there have been times, you know, when it can feel like thankless, you know, like when the ceiling gets destroyed or our backyard is covered in cigarette butts and beer bottles. But, you know, it's always been worth it to clean up and just to do it all over again, you know, like that's part of the fun now. It's just kind of like the day after, like we're out there goofing around, cleaning up, and it's just all a big part of it, you know.
I mean, that's pretty remarkable, is that people getting into it, and not just the house. I mean, okay, it's one thing to go to a house to see shows, but I mean, experiencing Yellow Tears from like maybe, I don't know, 2020 on or whatever, 2015 onwards, not necessarily being part of that, you know, mid 2000s noise era Yellow Tears, but kind of experiencing what it's become since then. And I mean, you guys have done some crazy things, and like you said, you, like Ryan mentioned, maybe you guys kind of pop your heads out once in a while or do something really crazy once in a while, and then some years of kind of silence. How have things changed with the project since, I think the last one being like the Cult of the Yellow Tears release, right? I mean, that was the last Hospital release, wasn't it?
That was the last Hospital release. We've had a couple of releases. We did our kind of like self-released. So there was what was supposed to be a double CD on Hospital called Golden Showers May Bring Flowers. But that was,
I mean, I know there's been a couple of releases since then. There's, you know, there's the 2020 Dead Gods release and stuff like that, and there's been like other things that popped up since then. But like, what did something? Was there a point where that kind of switched into new territory, the project?
Well, you know, I think it was a confluence of both, you know, the crew here kind of splitting up, like the original crew, Ryan and Margaret from Far Rockaway, you know, they were both living here. Their relationship ended. A couple, like Nick from Diaphragm, had moved out before that. So it started to change here, and then Ryan ended up moving out as well, which definitely like changed the way we were able to work. And also like our collaborative relationship with Hospital ended. It ended like amicably, but he couldn't put that record out, and we had a couple of like small disagreements artistically or creatively, and it kind of, and also just the direction we were moving in felt like maybe it wasn't the right platform moving forward. But you know, we've never like found another like platform really to release things after that. So I think like that definitely like impacted the public facing aspect of the project. Both of those things, like, yeah, we weren't able to like produce music as consistently as we had when we all lived together, and also kind of losing that representation, which wasn't like necessarily a bad thing. It was what was the right thing to happen, but kind of, you know, having like a label that was like pushing you to like, you know, let's do, okay, and then the next thing will be this, like it definitely kept us on a schedule. So like, and kept us like with deadlines and things that were, you know, yeah, we had to and wanted to. It wasn't like we felt pressured. Like that was where we were.
Good pressure, good mode.
Yeah, good pressure. Yeah, through that time, it was just it wasn't pressure. It was like momentum. It was like, okay, we have this. Like now we're gonna keep going, and then it took us a couple of years after like both of these things really these like you know, molecular like aspects like really changed, and so we had to kind of rediscover how we could take the project forward. And there was definitely like times throughout the last 10 years where like it hasn't been as like solid. Like there's been questions as to like what the future is going to be. But like I said, I mean, you know, if anything, there's a painful and limitless amount of like material that we have in our hard drives, and you know, in our several hard drives and in the ether. But you know, it's just like, yeah, for some reason for all of these reasons, it's been, you know, we still haven't answered the question of like how do we like release music basically.
I'd kind of cut you off when you talked about that double CD release, but tell me about that album.
Yeah,
you said it was intended for Hospital originally, and then that's you guys ended up kind of releasing it set on your own, or
yeah, which obviously like, you know, didn't really land. And I think because of just the nature of like not having any, you know, not knowing anything about releasing, you know, at least not to the magnitude that Dominic did, obviously. So
how did that album differ from the material before, or what was that album all about?
I think it was kind of the culmination of all of those concepts that we had been talking about. It was also very much like we imagined it as this environmental like narrative album that was going to be, you know, a lot of like a lot of binaural field recordings that were still manipulated, but it was fully like this kind of narrative and world that we wanted to create and explore. And I think, you know, conceptually it really, we brought in like a lot of our own biography into it, and kind of created like a pastiche like character almost of the three of our like experiences, ideas, concepts, and then projected into this kind of like near future world that we wanted to like explore. And you know, it's funny because a lot of like we've noticed like how the actual world has lived up in some ways to some of the concepts that we were trying to get into.
How do you think the world has changed since that time frame when the band was super active and you guys were really hungrily like exploring these themes? You mentioned kind of the fact that it maybe kind of foresaw or kind of predicted some of the things that ended up happening. I don't know if you meant culturally, politically, societally. What can you say about that?
Yeah. Do you want me to try and answer?
Maybe you want to start. I could jump
Okay.
and think about it.
Well, I think a big part of it has been, well, certainly like this thing about identity and about kind of the voyeurism, like social media, I think is just the way that it isolates, and the way that also sexuality and like pornography, it becomes embedded in like your everyday experience, and what that does to you as far as like separating you from others, and maybe even from, kind of like confusing like your own self or something, and kind of becoming lost in this hypersexualized culture. I don't know, that was like a part of it to some degree, I think.
I think that like in some of the characters that we've taken on I mean, I'm thinking about my character, the host freak, who's kind of like antagonistic host of like certain events that we've done live, where it's kind of like it just employs like I would employ a lot of forced crowd participation, where it almost seems like hazing, and but I guess I always kind of thought it was getting into this kind of territory that explored like group psychology, and that politically almost like this like jingoistic, like nationalistic form. I mean, I guess, I see that now like politically with people like Donald Trump, and there's kind of like cultish like following behind him, where people are like lost in the cult of personality. And
Yeah, no, and also I think this it was the culmination of this thing we were exploring with like kind of humiliation in this like public entertainment forum, and also like it's just very much like influenced by our suburban upbringings, and kind of suburban secrets, like the what's going on like behind closed doors, and just the way that we consume entertainment, and how that's like impacting us, as a group and as individuals. Definitely the group psychology thing, but there's a lot of individual psychology too. I mean, to some degree, it's not necessarily, it still isn't like totally clear exactly what we were getting at, and that's kind of like what we were talking about, where it's like, we have these like titles and they mean something to us, but it's not always like something we're able to, it's more intuitive. It's like not necessarily something we're able to like articulate verbally. And now at this point, it's been so long since we completed that it's like hard to, definitely the theater of like, of public humiliation, and also this aspect of like wanting to seek something pure and natural, like, and kind of like still connect. I think there's definitely this like longing. There's this theme of like longing for kind of transcendence and acceptance, and connection on that record. That's a big theme of it, where it's like trying to discover yourself in a world that is very inhospitable.
It seems to me like, just think about it now, that a lot of the things that you guys kind of played with and explored and poked into were almost like a warning or something, or ended up being kind of like a warning of where we're at now. Whereas like some of that stuff now is just too real to be even taken as art, like what we have today with social media, and what we have today with, people just kind of, lonely people like narcissistically projecting themselves and looking for
Yeah.
attention it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, just, kind of
Right.
just begging for some sort of public humiliation or confirmation. And that's, I guess I see that in a lot of your earlier work. And I mean, I even thought about this at some times. I mean, I've even pointed out the fact or thought about the fact that, like, I don't know when, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, those like photos of Dominic, like, I think they're private photos, like from the internet or whatever, kind of like
Or
leaked
like
out, and it was like,
or the OK Cupid
yeah,
picture,
like that, or like him like on a like family vacation.
Yeah.
And at the time, I mean, I'm sure that he got a lot of people teasing him about it, and it was kind of like, haha, whatever. I don't mean, I didn't find it funny, but it was kind of like, wow, like that's so crazy that someone's personal photos are out there now. But it's like nowadays, that's the bread and butter of any noise artist, is like, you have an Instagram account, you post selfies of yourself constantly, you try to, it's like that at the time was like really almost radical, and like people were teasing him about it, but like now look at everyone else now. Everyone's, in the mirror doing, photos of themselves trying to look cool or whatever. And it's just like, the Yellow Tears also with your work also seem to kind of hint at a lot of the stuff that would just become our reality.
No. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think to some degree for sure. Yeah, I mean, with that record in particular, it was this like imagining of like a future. And there's even like references to like social media and stuff. If you pay attention, like we talk about it. We don't like name any like platform, but we say like, in some of the scenes, because that was a part of it. We actually, a lot of it is like incidental, but some of it is like scenes that we like constructed actively. We talk about, we make references to that, and it was kind of in its like nascent stage at that point. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a humanistic like project. Ultimately, I think we're coming from a place of like empathy for the human, and just wanting to understand the human condition, and trying to use our own like vulnerability as a passageway to that. And it's not necessarily, I mean, it's social commentary for sure, but I don't think we're necessarily like espousing like any kind of like morality judgment. It's more just like, if it feels that way, that's because our own experience is informing that. And yeah, like it's definitely like things I personally have struggled to integrate into the world as it has progressed in that direction.
Are there specific things you want people to take away or feel from Yellow Tears?
I don't think particular. I think just wanting them to feel. I think just wanting them to like feel and kind of be able to like identify something in themselves. I think that's the ultimate goal. I mean, I think, yeah, like I said, I think a lot of our stuff, it comes from a very like authentic place. So I think we put ourselves out there as kind of a call to like, like almost as I mean, really just to model what I think is really important, and that's for people to be vulnerable and to be open and to connect with other human beings. We've figured out a very like niche and strange way of doing that, but it's very much like real, like our, it's not, it's very authentic. And so I think that's really all I would hope, is that in some way, even if it's repulsion, that it helps somebody locate their own authenticity. that would be a fantastic, outcome, even if it's one person or whatever, for me personally. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, just that, yeah, people be open-minded, and I'm just, happy when people can connect to some, idea or theme that they recognize in it, or an aspect of the performance. And, but yeah, pretty much what Jeremy said.
I think like something about the image of like someone doing something humiliating or kind of defacing or over the top, like vulnerability or exposure of themselves kind of has like this, yeah, it kind of has this religious meaning to it in some way. Kind of like Jesus on the cross is like when you see Jesus on the cross suffering or something like that, you get this kind of it forces you to kind of feel that, and I empathize with that. And I think, I mean, I've never seen you guys perform live, to be honest, but I mean, what I've gathered is like you guys go there and do things that are like, I mean, even like the project like Teeny Bopper or something like that, like just this kind of like overly uncomfortable step into like personal humiliation or exposure that I think
Right.
is hard for people to come to terms with, but can be like really transformative
Yeah, absolutely.
if they take it seriously, if they let themselves,
Right. But also, like, I think, one thing I always like is for things to be able to function on multiple levels. So, like, there's something on the surface that works, and maybe people can, like, take away whatever, like, something, relatively, like, vapid from that. But also, there's deeper things for people who want to, like, look for. And yeah, and there's a lot that's revealed in our work about us as people. And so I think, but also, like, we hope to just like make intriguing like sound, so it's kind of hopefully there for both for both types of like viewer or
Mhm.
experience, that they can appreciate it, and just sonically or just as like, a spectacle or whatever, but that there's all these deeper concepts that they can explore if they feel like really going there with us.
Mhm. Can you talk about like what you've been doing with your work since those kind of more album-based uh releases? Because there've been, I remember some years ago, before YouTube was really a big thing and before social media was a thing, but you guys put out like a little, I don't know, was it a video, if it was a trailer for something or what it was like a news report. I don't remember what it was, but I came across it and I was like, oh fuck, what's this? Yellow Tears? And like Dom was like a news reporter or something like that. And then
Yeah, absolutely.
That was
I've seen stuff like that pop up over the years, and I haven't like followed all of it or seen exactly what the whole thread is, but you guys have branched out from just music.
The way that we ended up releasing Golden Showers, May Bring Flowers, it didn't end up being a double CD. It was the music was released as a flash drive, and accompanying the flash drive was a VHS where we made videos that went with each track on the album. And so the ones that you're referring to are from Golden Showers, May Bring Flowers.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think like Ryan was saying earlier, like the visual aspect was always like really big. I mean, which has its lineage in like punk. I mean, using like banners and stuff like that, and really kind of creating a mythology that's both visual and audio for the project. So we were always like doing visual stuff, and our performances still during that album time then started using installations. So I think for a couple years, we were kind of almost it like we did a lot of stuff that was like installation based and more like, which also severely limited like the places we could play, because we couldn't just show up anywhere with like a bunch of PVC and construct this like thing that was like sound sculpture or whatever. And that period, I would say, culminated in 2015, where we did the 10-year Yellow Tears anniversary party here at Red Light, and we built like a full on like theme park, like an actual water slide that was
Yeah.
tall in the house and was dangerous to like go down, and was all the sound triggers, and it was a fully immersive like event. So, I think that was definitely a period where we were kind of like became really interested in actually creating these like sites and like fully immersive like experiences that were like in the that were outgrowths of the world that we had created sonically, but could now be like actualized physically in new ways. And
What did that look like, and what was the reaction to it? I mean, describe the main event, so to speak, or the opening party of that.
yeah.
And was it called Septic World?
That was kind of like the name of the theme park, but it was just the event was called 24 Hours of Showers.
Okay.
And it was a full 24-hour long like event basically, where it started in the evening of like one night, and we had like an opening ceremony. The ride opened, some people like went down it. Exploring Jezebel ended up playing in the basement. I'm not sure they've done another performance. So that was.
Before you go further, what was the Exploring Jezebel set like?
There's actually like, I think, video footage of it on YouTube. Math Bill, who's like been the guy who like documented like every show in the early days, and was probably the one who filmed sets from the show you guys played.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think filmed some of it, but well, we had reached out to Dom, so like, we had already like split off from hospital, but we were still like, hey, we're having this 10-year anniversary party. Like, obviously you've been so important to like the evolution of the band, and we'd love to, if you could like contribute something like live. And he came and he said, well, what about Exploring Jezebel? We could do something with that. And I was like, that would be unbelievable. So it was like, all the lights were on in the basement, which is already like different than like almost everything we've had. There was a red like curtain backdrop, and it was 3 men who were dressed in these bizarre like mannequin. I don't even know how to explain it. It was like so strange and bizarre, and they were using portable heaters to make the basement like extremely hot and uncomfortable. And I can't even like remember the sound, honestly, like, because the imagery was so powerful. Like, it was the imagery that I remember. I mean, this is almost 10 years ago at this point.
I remember it sounding really minimalist and just like tone generating.
It didn't really seem like clear who was generating the sound, or if it was like playback, or like it was unclear, because it was more of like a physical like space and performance that you just like were in. And I think it was kind of just like, like amplified. It might have been the heaters that were amplified, actually. It was that type of sound where it was like nondescript. And it was really special. I felt really like honored that Dom like did that for us. And then they did that, and then Matt Folden, who is a close friend of ours and a really close friend of Dom. I'm not sure. I haven't been in touch with him, unfortunately. He was in a project called KP, which released several things through Hospital. And he had this kind of like noisy techno project called Dual Action that kind of closed out like the party aspect of that first night. And we have incredible video footage from that. Like, we had this analog video mixer, a friend of ours, Chad, who's done a lot of video work for live events here, was like we have security cameras, and he was able to mix all these cameras and like with effects, and it's so incredible. It's like one of the best documents of anything we've had here. But that went on for a while. and then it was just like, then it got kind of depraved, like run the ride like overnight, and then into the next day, like
It was like 10 a.m. We opened it the next morning.
yeah. And at some point, our neighbor in the back was like, excuse me, like yelling, because it was loud too. Like every time
Yeah.
someone went down the slide, it triggered all this sound that was like really like destructive sounding. And it was like in the afternoon, and she was like, and we kind of like sheepishly went over, and she was like, not that this isn't like the craziest thing you guys have ever done, but like I'm trying to play with my kid out here. Do you think you can like turn it down? And we were like, yeah, of course. So,
Someone
it's
who
funny.
knows you well and who's seen what you guys have been up to for a while.
They don't know us actually.
No,
Those
but they-
neighbors,
okay.
but they've like, we've lived here forever, and they've seen us do like all these crazy parties and shows and events that a lot of them have been in the outdoor space. So like,
Yeah.
Made us realize that they pay attention to what we've
Yeah.
been doing for all these.
but also it was cool just that they acknowledged like, yeah, this is definitely like the craziest shit you guys have ever done. I mean, it felt like life affirming to some degree. Like,
Yeah.
it's like that these kind of other like people who have nothing to do with this, like have in some way like appreciated this and not been like offended or hurt by it to like try and stop it from happening. So,
That's great.
we have a good relationship with some of our neighbors, and others we don't know quite as well, but we've all been here together in this like space for many years at this point. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's impressive that it, like, again, like that it has lasted that long.
Yeah.
You
And
guys
then
must
that
show
was,
some. I mean, you guys do wild shit, but you must also sort of be conscious of like respecting your neighbors or respecting the area in some way, because
for sure.
This was a unique event in that it was, there was a lot of sound outside, but typically it's contained to the basement and you can't really hear it from outside. So
Right. We've done things though, like we've had this festival thing, Burning Festival, that we did more in the early years. But we've had like when that happens, there's hundreds of people in the backyard. So it's more like just the scene of people that probably anyone else would be aware of, more so than like whatever like band or noise is happening. But and we get dunk tanks sometimes and stuff like that. So we create spectacles that the neighbors can definitely like see and so, but even that's like that Yellow Tears thing was so long ago. At this point, there's been like, we've continued to do stuff for so long. So it's all changed. With Yellow Tears, we've gotten more kind of like studio bound, I guess, over time, and just kind of, and that's evolved so many times over the last however many years. But we are still like working on stuff.
it seems like it's developed almost like a even more like carnival-esque vaudeville, like nightmare cartoon atmosphere. Like the latest release that I heard was the one on Dead Gods, and of course it's sonically very different from like the stuff like Pissmop era, for example. What's informing your newer work, and like what's kind of influenced it, or where have you been trying to take it sonically and aesthetically specifically?
I think the interesting thing is that a lot of our sources have kind of remained like consistent, but all it is that we've created like newer and newer generations of them. So I think the thing that we're kind of coming to and realizing now is that like all of the microscopic like obsessions and like sound things that we got into in those early years have now kind of spawned their own universes of like exploration and of sound. And what we're trying to do is now is kind of like figure out a way to make that cohesive again. And so in some way it's kind of become this like cosmic or quantum kind of like understanding. I mean, we're influenced by so many things, both like musically and culturally, and we don't really have like one specific aesthetic like mission or something at this point. I think we're just like, we have the language that we've developed in the way of like manipulating and exploring sound that we've kind of co-created together. And so it's really like getting into further like microscopic aspects of that, but also like trying to like zoom out and find connecting threads between all these different things. Like one thing we've been really into is like using our own voices, obviously, which we started doing, but we got really interested in the idea of like kind of just the fodder and the incidental things, the things that we didn't mean to say or do or whatever, you know. And that became like more interesting. And so we became focused on like using like all of our stutters, for instance, noticing tropes in our like, you know, that we're always saying recording, like, is it recording? Is it recording? Is it recording? And then like kind of using that as like a compositional tool or something, which is now then becomes a meta psychology of the individuals and of the band as a whole. So I think, you know, and, you know, like pornography continues to be like fertile ground for exploration and, finding new ways of like bringing that in. And I think what we like to do often is juxtapose that kind of thing with more mundane or like incidental sounds to the point where it's very confusing, like what is what. I mean, on the Dead Gods tape, like there are parts that are like pornography that don't sound like pornography, and there's parts that aren't that do sound like pornography.
Right.
So I think that's like definitely something we've always been interested in and kind of continue to explore. Perception and what it's really more about, like what you as a listener like identify and what that says about your background, your cultural understanding, and your psychology. But I don't know that we have like one specific aesthetic or anything that we're kind of like going for. It's more just we have all these outgrowths of like the sonic worlds that we've explored, and so it's kind of just like expanding on them, becoming more microscopic, becoming more macroscopic, and just like, you know, just kind of like seeing where that goes. And then trying to like understand it from a more like universal perspective, like how it all represents us and the project.
Frank seems to be the silent, violent one of the band. I've always seen you associated with the band, and I always heard people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know specifically heard things, but like heard like, oh, Frank is a beast. Frank, you know. But what, Jeremy? What? But you've been very quiet this whole time, Jeremy. What can you say about Frank? What can you tell me about Frank's personality and
Frank is a very.
What do you love about Frank and in the context of Yellow Tears?
Well, I can't say what I love about Frank in the context of Yellow Tears without just saying what I love about him in general. Yes. But Frank is a very courageous person, with creativity. He has, in Yellow Tears specifically, he has been willing to be the more like public facing, presence and kind of hold the uncomfortable things that we've like explored as a group and kind of be the one to represent that often, which I admire in him so greatly, and you know, where I've struggled to maybe like be that or do that sometimes. It's funny. I don't really see Frank as being the silent person, but
maybe
I think
he's not.
It's hard for me to separate my. You know, we've known each other for over 20 years and have lived together for like the vast majority of that time, and so our lives have been so intertwined that I don't know how much I can separate, you know, my like cellular like understanding from what someone else might like perceive. But I just know that Frank is just an incredibly accepting person and an open-minded person and an unbelievably flexible collaborator. He really like is very easy to work with. He is really takes like challenges like well, like he's helped us like, you know, realize and actualize ideas that maybe were coming more from like me or from Ryan at different points. I mean, he is a beast for sure, but he's a gentle beast. He's not. I wouldn't call him violent at all.
No, I said it because it rhymed.
Yeah, no, totally. But yeah, I mean, he's really like a compassionate and a you know and a very like warm presence. And I mean, really like our friendship, which like in a lot of ways was kind of the nucleus of how Yellow Tears like came about. And so you know, like I think it informed the values and the ethos of the project. So even if like Frank's not necessarily, you know, doing something in the project or whatever, like it still is like a part of an outgrowth of him and our relationship. And I just mean like in a given moment, like just
Right.
because he's not playing the sample or sound or whatever at some moment, it still is a part of like his expression, because his expression is our expression, you know.
Does that courage kind of to be extreme, but also the compassion that Jeremy was talking about, does that come naturally to you, or how do those things reconcile themselves with each other to you?
I think it does come naturally to some degree. I mean, I guess I'm not fully conscious of, you know, the way I am. I just am the way I am. And certainly it's informed by a lot of like my past struggles, growing up, with bullying and like isolation and, humiliation and stuff like that, which is for me really, you know, it's part of a lot of the, you know, it's inspirational, all that kind of like negative stuff that I've had to endure, you know, to the music. But yeah, I guess it comes easy to me. It's not something I'm really that conscious of. Certain aspects of compassion I'm conscious of. Like I've always been, you know, into like political activism, and I'm, you know, I've been a vegan for close to a decade, and things like that. You know, I just believe in social justice, and caring for and being there for my friends, and trying to be, you know, selfless and to listen. So something I strive to do, and I think that I do successfully, according to Jeremy.
For sure. Somehow we didn't really like touch on this, but I think yeah, like some of our like we've really brought in, you know, memories of you know, and like our adverse experiences that, you know, of course everybody has adverse experiences, but I think that had, you know, kind of all sharing like these kind of like troubling things in our more distant past really has helped us connect with one another too. And so like I think the platform of our friendships has then encouraged like that kind of like compassion and like sensitivity more so, and then that bleeds itself into our like work, obviously.
I was going to ask, like, when you know, the hazing element, for example, if that was like this fascination with the hazing and the humiliation and things like that, if that was kind of a reflection of something that you guys had experienced or partaken in, either on either side of the coin.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
We probably more so like on the receiving end, but I think all children sometimes find themselves in that situation where, they don't. I mean, I was always like a very like sensitive kid, and I still made bad decisions and hurt other people, and so, it's not like about like punishing yourself for that, but it's just about like coming to terms with, like what we're capable of in both directions. Like as human beings, we're capable of like causing immense suffering. We're capable of experiencing immense suffering. And obviously, yeah, that is an existential reality for people. And so I think, yeah, like it absolutely like has impacted that subject matter and topic, just that like, it's part of the authenticity thing. It's part of like trying to reconcile, our identities and stuff. But by doing that in kind of the safety net of like a trusting friendship, you're kind of able to explore all of that without re-experiencing, the really like negative impacts of it, and you can kind of take control of it in a certain way. I think, in your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But you need help. You need the help from like your friends or from your collaborators. You need to be able to like, have that safety net, which we've provided for each other.
Do you think power electronics or extreme music, even like of this more sadistic or whatever we want to call it nature, are conducive to inspiring compassion or like encouraging it?
I think it's absolutely possible. I think it comes down to like the intention of the creator. I mean, I can certainly look at like some of the albums that have been really impactful to me, and I think, yeah, like I think that's the effect that they've had on me. But I think sometimes it can just be like gratuitous also, and kind of not really like conscious. So I don't think categorically it's one or the other. I think it just comes down to what the intention is, but I think it absolutely has that potential.
Because I sometimes think about like I mean, even independent of the intention of the artist, like, or maybe in opposition to the intention of the artist, I wonder if like, looking at or experiencing music or art that's like maybe very cruel in one way or another, still can kind of like hone one's sensitivity or feelings of compassion, or numb it. I mean, or lead one to being, cruel themselves. For I always like to ask people to tell me their top 5 noise releases or, industrial, power electronics, experimental, whatever of all time. And usually I hope that people don't have it prepared, because I like to hear off the top of their heads what kind of comes to mind as like what your top 5 would be. Of course, it's not about actual ranking, just the 5 that are important to you. So, Frank, can we start with you?
Sure. So definitely I would say a top 5 would be Slicer by Wolf Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely Remember by Genocide Organ. Nomo by Pauline Oliveros.
Mm-hmm.
Catholic Priests Fuck Children by the Grey Wolves. And Music for Handicapped Ears by Alza Galzaga.
Okay, cool. And Jeremy?
Yeah, so, I've seen the podcast. I did kind of like remember a couple days ago that this might be coming, so I kind of thought about it. So it's not off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Unfortunately. But it's obviously it's impossible to really like quantify anything. I think I'm just trying to think of things that profoundly like influence me. So not necessarily the things that I consistently listen to all the time, but things that really like hit deep, and when I do revisit it, I still like feel that. So I would say Woundfucker by Atrax Morg is a big one. I mean, really all of Marco's like work in total. I just think it's it. Like that's it right there, kind of. When you speak about authenticity and vulnerability, I don't know that you could think of like another artist who does that more in this like genre, but probably New Britain by Whitehouse. Although I might, have gotten into their digital era like more and listened to it more. That record was really like the thing that grabbed me when I first heard it. It was probably like the first power electronics like record that I heard. I'm gonna say there's a Prurient Wolf Eyes split called The Warriors. I think it was released in like maybe 2004, 2005. The Prurient material on that has got to be up there for me. It's just, that's what it is. Like, that's it right there. I'm kind of going off now. I don't really know the other two. I would say, I would probably tend to agree with Frank with Alza Gelziga. I might put Bypassing Time Passing in there. But Music for Handicapped Ears is definitely like an all-time favorite. The Pauline Oliveros record for sure, but just to give something different, Runzelstern and Gurgelstock, personally, I can't actually remember the name. It's like a split with Mama Bar, I think. I can't remember the name of it. It's like, I want to say it's like an Italian language record. Like the title is like in Italian for some reason. But yeah, that was just like the first Runzelstern that I got. And I mean, Rudolph is, like I became really, really heavily obsessed and influenced with his work and with Shimfluk Group, and obviously Dave Phillips too. And but yeah, I gotta put that in there. So I guess that's 5.
Cool. And then what about some, maybe not a top 5, but what about some new stuff that you guys are listening to, or at least into, or some things of the past couple years?
I've been on a death metal kick since like quarantine. I can't get out of it.
Okay.
Super into just like really aggressive metal. Really love Obituary, and try to think of some other names. I don't know. I guess I don't really listen to new music,
Yeah.
I've been getting into a lot of like older metal, like thrash and death metal, which has been really fun. I've been really into painting, and I just really love to listen to that type of music while I paint.
Like I've seen your paintings. I mean, that's cool that you, like the old masters would like not accept that. It's like not painting music.
Right.
Yeah.
Somehow it works for me. I don't know.
Cool.
And for me, so what I've been doing professionally, I guess, is I'm getting out of a master's program right now for music therapy. And so, and I did my clinical internship at Kings County Hospital, which is in Brooklyn. And so really like most of the music that I've been listening to has been like popular music, and to like recreate that stuff. So, no specific artists in general, but lots of old like R&B, hip hop, soca. Personally, like Ryan actually got me into this Sarah McLachlan record, Surfacing, from like the late 90s, that I've been like kind of obsessed with. So I love all kinds of music, and I've always loved popular music, and Actually, like I always tell the story about how when I first heard New Britain, to me it was like, I was like, this is like pop music, but like an alternate version, like alternate reality, like twisted version. And that's how I always like understood power electronics was like pop, because it's like songwriting kind of. So
Yeah.
So, like I never really saw any reason to like separate those two things. I just liked both of them because to me they were like two sides of the same coin, and different ways to tell the human story or something. So, so mostly just like that kind of stuff, the stuff, that people that I've worked with, share with me, Whitney Houston, like all kinds of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool.
Music is therapeutic. Pop music and power electronics both, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, my decision to go into that field is absolutely like influenced by our work together. And I think, one of the things I was saying earlier is I do think our work qualifies me in a lot of ways, maybe more than other people, to work with diverse ways of like being in the world and with mental illness. I've worked in inpatient psychiatry, so a lot of people who don't fit into what society has termed as normalcy. So I think our work has given me a lot of like room to sit with those different ways of like existing. And power electronic, and also like a totally radically different perspective on sound and what constitutes like music or something. So a lot of times you're with people who have no musical background, but you're still trying to like improvise together or create music together. So, it's been a very strong foundation for that kind of work.
Cool. Well, much respect. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me about Yellow Tears. Long live Yellow Tears and RLD.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us, and thanks for asking good questions. And yeah,
Cool.
we're honored to be here. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, guys. We'll talk soon. Take care and have a good day.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right.